is by third step prayer, Rob.
You got it, Leo. Page 63, everybody, if you want to follow along. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Good for today. Thank God.
Okay, we are going to begin chapter 5, how it works today, which I think on the one hand, I'll say that this may be the only time that you actually listen when you're in the meetings. If you guys remember in the fellowship meetings, how we read how it works and how it will be, in some cases, some people will listen and others don't. So I think that I've heard a number of times people saying, well, how does this program work after they get through a meeting, and they don't realize that we've read how it works and this particular chapter. So a couple of sidebar things here is was written in 1938, and it is well, it's chock full of a lot of stuff. So we're going to take our time as we get through it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with Rob, and we will start at the very beginning here. Sir?
Chapter 5, How It Works, page 58, everybody. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path, the path being the 12 steps, a program of recovery as outlined in this book. It is a spiritual path, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through this chapter. And it does give you some ideas about those that don't recover and kind of the reasons why. And I think it's a good thing for us to kind of qualify, because I think in terms of some cases, even for those of us that have recovered, I think sometimes we look at people and say, well, if I can recover, then you can recover. And largely, you're absolutely right. However, some people just haven't had that spiritual experience. They haven't been able to completely give themselves to this simple program. Who are constitutionally incapable of being honest. And that's another thing about this first paragraph here. We talk about honest and honesty 3 different times within the first paragraph in and of itself. And that's an important element. If you cannot be honest with yourself, you're going to find that you're going to be behind the power curve, as it would be with this program. And you find yourself that you're going to be incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So in this, I've highlighted the very first sentence. I think it's an important sentence. I highlighted the incapable of being honest with themselves, because that's an important thing. I even underline honest. I also have highlighted they are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. And at the very, very end, the last part of the last sentence, it says, if they have the capacity to be honest. So we're going to drive that point home as we go through this chapter. You have to be completely honest with yourself. Sure, you need to be honest with other people about your condition, about your situation, about what you're going through and what you're trying to accomplish. But deep down inside, this is going to have to demand a pure and real honesty with yourself. And otherwise, you're just going to find yourself you're going to struggle. You just really are. And it does say here, rigorous honesty. So there's an indication there that there's going to be some work involved, and that's okay too. This isn't an easy program. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today going through it in such detail. So there is some work that needs to be done. All right, Rob?
Yeah, and as Leo said, it was written in 1938. It's the meat and the potatoes of the program. You know, this is what the program's all about. And also, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path, the path of the first 100 people. They've carved it out. All we have to do is follow it, do what they did, and we'll get the same results. Simple, but not easy. The price had to be paid.
Mhm.
Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And some of these we bought. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was no until we let go. Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a little bit of this leap of faith. One of the other things that I kind of lived by before I got sober, and my wife had given me a card one time, and it said, "Leap, and the net will appear." And there is some level of faith that's required to get here. And remember, in our last chapter, we talked about we agnostics. You know, you've got to have that spiritual experience. You need to believe before you have faith. And so the belief is going to come first and faith comes after. Well, here's where we are at the after, where you're going to have that faith. And they talk about that our stories are going to be disclosed in a general way. What they're saying here is that those were the first 100 folks' experiences. We kind of focus on the first 3 to 5 folks that were in AA. And sure, you can identify with portions of Bill's story, or you can identify with Ebby's story or Bob's story, et cetera, et cetera. The point being is that we're giving you some general thoughts and ideas about how and what happened to us, which is kind of, their own experience, but it's one that we can find many elements of that we can identify with. And then as it goes and what they are like now. So we're going to not only talk about what they were going through in order to get through this progressive disease that we all have suffered from, what they did to recover, and then what they're like now after recovery. And I think that's also important because you need to be able to see what you're going after. And the book does a very good job of identifying with that. So here it is. This is kind of up to you. And it does actually say this 3 different times in this one sentence. If you have decided that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And those certain steps are all of the steps. We're not talking about the first 3 and then just keep wash, rinse, repeat of those first 3. We're talking about all 12 of the steps, as well as living the program in all of the facets of your life. And this is another thing is that we talk about this too. And sometimes, people equate that, you're willing to go to any lengths to embrace this program. We're not talking about somebody that says, are you willing to take all of your clothes off and run down the street in 6 inches of snow for a quarter mile to say that I'm willing to do anything to go to any lengths to do this program. We're talking about realistic, fearless, thorough, rigorous work that you're willing to go after, meaning that whatever it takes in order to get through this program, you're willing to put that effort into it to accomplish that. That's what we're talking about. So let's, if somebody ever kind of goes, well, I was willing to do X, Y, or Z, and it just seems kind of bombastic, I'll just use that word. That's not what we're talking about. We're really talking about that inner strength, that finding of us and having a spiritual experience and actually going through all of the steps that it takes to get through that. Rob?
Remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon.
Yep. So I not only underlined remember, I circled it. This is, I only do this like 2 or 3 times in the book, but there is that saying that remember, we can't remember. Remember, we've forgotten. All right. So the fact is, you need to remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. All right. I don't know that you can describe the negative connotations of alcohol any better than those 3 words: cunning, baffling, and powerful, as it applies to an alcoholic. We have to be reminded of that on a constant basis because we forget. And we've done that more than we care to admit at times. And that is we forgot about the debacles, we forgot about the things we've said, the things we did. In fact, some cases we blacked out and didn't even have recollection whatsoever. So let alone, we not only didn't remember it, we didn't member it. So it is something that we have to continually remind ourselves about how powerful and negative this substance is to us. And without help, it is too much for us. Okay, so this is a reminder here that you are powerless over alcohol. So being powerless, you need something of a higher power to help you get through this. And so that's just another reminder there. But there is one who has all power, and that one is God. May you find him now, not later, not some other time, but may you find him right now. Exactly, Rob. That's exactly right. So very, very important. And half measures availed us nothing. So some people decide that they're going to try to drink only 2 days out of the week. They're going to, admit that they, they're powerless over alcohol, but they're going to get through maybe steps 4, and they're going to stop at step 4 and just decide that they've done this, whole thing themselves and they've got it from here. No, that's not it. You've got to do everything. You've got to put yourself into a position where you are going to be completely immersed in this program and do everything possible to make sure that it works for you. And it is a turning point. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, some of us get that epiphany moment for a spiritual experience and it happens all at once. And there's this big kind of a realization of this higher power. And others of us, like myself, it took a little bit of time. I had to kind of work through it. I kind of got there a little step at a time, a couple of steps forward, maybe a step back, 2 steps forward, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point in time that you finally wake up and you have that spiritual experience and you realize that you can have and tap into this higher power, and all of a sudden things just look so much easier. It's an incredible experience. I can't tell you how incredible it is. But we ask his protection and care with complete abandon. Again, complete abandon. You are going to give yourself over this to this program, and you got to let go. Absolutely. All right. And we're going to take some time here, Rob, as we go through these steps and everything. What I think we're going to do is we'll go ahead and read through all 12 of them real quick. And then we'll just take one at a time and kind of quickly, detail each one as we go. All right, Rob?
Perfect. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, Continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs.
Absolutely. So there it is, just in a nutshell, the 12 steps that we're going to be talking about. One of the things I want to talk about to the very beginning here is that there has to be an honesty, a willingness, and surrender in your mindset going into these steps themselves. Now, here's a couple of things that I've done in my book, and I'm going to share them with you. You can choose to write these things in. But first 3 steps are known as the foundation steps. So I just put a little mark there between steps 1, 2, and 3, and out to the left, put the foundation steps. Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the action steps. I wrote that out to the left. And steps 10, 11, and 12 are the growth or maintenance steps. And another thing I've done, and this is where I've taken each individual step, and we'll kind of go through this as we go along. But step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. I highlighted the powerless over alcohol because that's the important part of that particular step, and that our lives have become unmanageable. This is the honesty step. I wrote out honesty out to the right of that step. Came to believe, this is step 2, that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I went ahead and highlighted the whole thing there. That particular step is the hope step. So I wrote out to the right, hope. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I highlighted as we understood Him. It is also italicized. And that is the faith step. And number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory. It just basically said a searching and fearless. I highlighted that of ourselves, and I wrote the courage step. This is the courage step. And then admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And I went ahead and highlighted the whole step there. And this is the integrity step. Wrote out integrity out to the right. And then number 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. I wrote out willingness. This is the willingness step. Number 7, humbly asked. I highlighted that. And then to remove our shortcomings, I highlighted that. And this is called the humility step. And I also underlined our shortcomings because we're not talking about somebody else's, we're talking about our own. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed. I highlighted list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. I underlined all. It is important that we are very, very complete in this. And this is the forgiveness step. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I highlighted the made direct amends to such people, and out to the right, I wrote that this is the justice step. And the other thing I'm going to note here is your biggest amend should be to your higher power, just as a kind of a note, just so you're kind of thinking through as you're talking and thinking about these amends. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's some misnomers, I think, with regard to what amends really are and who you should be making them to. Okay, number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and where and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I just highlighted the whole step there because it's kind of all important there for me. And that's the perseverance step. I wrote out perseverance out to the right. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation. I highlighted prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. I highlighted also as we understood him, because I think that's an important distinction here, and it's something we have to drive that point home, especially with those that are wary of using, the God that most people identify with. And this is the awareness step. So I wrote out to the right, awareness. And then on step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I highlighted having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. I wrote out service. So this is the service step, which is important. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we'll talk through these steps as we go along. So I'm not going to dive into each one of these steps right now as we go, but we are going to go into some detail of them. But that's just kind of how I set this up for myself, so that I could try and not only really know and understand the steps themselves, but kind of apply kind of a breakdown of these steps and see where we are with those. And then also kind of when I remind myself of the different types of things, whether that be honesty, hope, willingness, perseverance, awareness, service, etc. It's just a nice little one-word reminder of each of the steps and what they mean to me. So it's up to you whether or not that would be important to you as well. But I just thought I'd share that with you. Okay, Rob, let's go ahead and dig in.
Okay, sounds good. We're on page 60, everybody. Many of us exclaim, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.
Absolutely. So here's another thing here. If you look at this as a whole, and part of me breaking down off to the left and talking about, foundation steps, the action steps, et cetera, the maintenance steps, we all have to it's how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time, right? So let's apply the same kind of concept to the 12 steps. Nobody expects you to grasp everything and be perfect at this right off the bat. And especially if you're reviewing these as we are right now, where we're looking at all the steps as a whole, it looks pretty daunting. And okay, let's just step back for a second. Okay, sure. What an order. I can't go through with this. I mean, how the heck am I going to get there? Another analogy is that the person that's got 30 days of sobriety can't grasp when somebody that they're listening to in a Zoom meeting has 32 years of sobriety, but they can grasp when somebody's got 6 months, 90 days, or a year's worth of sobriety. So it's really, let's kind of start and let's just look at what's the next right thing in front of us. And what's the next right thing to do in the step that I'm in or the steps that I'm working on at that particular moment, and not worry about the steps that we have in the future, etc. All right. So don't be discouraged. All right. That's a big thing. And as a sponsor or somebody working with a newcomer, it's important that you emphasize that particular thing. And that is, hang in there. You're not alone. We're going to help you through it. The book answers all the questions, and we're going to go through this step by step. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. And in fact, I, even to this day, will sit back during the time that I meditate or I'm praying. I have to sit down and be honest with myself. I make mistakes all the time, and that's okay. At first, I thought that I was basically not adhering to the program because I was making the mistakes. But the fact is, you are going to want to wait. You're going to want to understand that it's okay to make a mistake. Recognize the mistake, make amends for that, try and correct it, move forward, and try not to make the same mistake a second time, if at all possible. We're not saints. We never will be. All right. So just get past that right off the bat. There's nothing more we can really say. But the fact is, we are willing. And that is that whole thing in step one. If you're in 2 and 3, if you are willing to acknowledge that there is a higher power out there, you're on your way. So this is a willingness to grow along spiritual lines, and the principles we have set are just guides and to progress, and we are claiming spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. So it's okay to make us, to stumble from time to time. There's going to be speed bumps in the road, as always, and guess what? Life happens. And you're going to find that, after years and years of things that have happened in your life, the things you've said, done, the debacles, the craziness, some of the things you've said, that kind of thing, you're not going to be overnight to be able to fix all of that. And it's going to take some time. And I'll just raise my hand and tell you right now, I'm still, even after what I consider is a long time without alcohol, I'm still making amends, and I'm still working on getting better. And I'm working on my emotional sobriety, if you will. I do have an addiction counselor that I see every couple of weeks, and we talk about that, but I'm also doing that with my wife. I think I probably harmed her the worst in all of this because I was closest to her, and she was right there with me through all of these debacles, if you will, and I'm still working on it. Okay, still. So never going to be perfect, but I'm always trying to get better, irrespective of whether or not it's a good day or a bad day, etc.
And
But you're recovered.
Exactly, Gary. Also, as we go further into the book, when we do stumble, it helps us what we need to do when we do stumble. So that'll be further on in the book. Something to look forward to, people. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved us of our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Yeah. So really very distinct and succinct way of just basically saying, look, here is a summary of where we've been and where we're going. The description of the alcoholic. So we've learned a lot about alcoholism. Chapter of the agnostic. And again, I would tell you that's for the agnostic, the atheist, and the true believer. And our personal adventures. Those are the stories that we've been reading, and that's the stories that are, in fact, in the book after the first portion of the book. And it does the before and after. And again, it's important because we've got to see where we're going, and we need to have that hope, if you will, as to what we're looking forward to. Give us these 3 pertinent ideas, okay? That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. It's another way of stating step 1, probably that no human power could have recovered or could have relieved our alcoholism. And that's also part of step 1 and 2. And the God could and would if he were sought. And you can kind of interchange that with your higher power. So it's where we are. These are talking about the steps and the process. Okay, this whole program that's outlined in this book. Rob?
Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do?
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, and probably no human power could have relieved us of our alcoholism. We're talking about steps 1 and 2 there, that God could and would if he were sought. Okay, and so So these are foundation steps. You can really get through this within just a few minutes if you are truly willing to focus on this and you're willing to open your mind and your heart to this spiritual experience. All right. So with that, being convinced, we were at step 3. All right. Now, this is the second thing I want to note. When we get to a point here, when we say we're at step 3, that means that we're at the beginning of a particular step, in this case, step 3. It doesn't mean that we're finished with that step, nor, and we'll see this kind of going forward, and this is more of a disclaimer as we kind of look at these, just because we're at a particular step, it means that we're at the point of preparing for that step, okay? Doesn't mean that we are actually doing that step. And there's an important distinction that I want to make, and I will make it again. I'll say it now, but I'll make it again. When it says we are at step 9, most folks, and this is where you've kind of got to understand how this chapter and how we kind of go through this program and what the process is. We don't really do step 9 until we do step 11. Okay, and I'll explain in much better detail of that, but just kind of put that in as on the back burner. When we get to step 9, I'm going to kind of go into detail, like I said, but we don't really do our step 9 until we've gotten to our step 11. Okay, so with that, we are at step 3, and that is only at the very beginning. Okay. Rob?
We're on page 60, everybody. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of his players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits.
Okay. One of the things I want to bring up, and that is starting on page 60, going through to page 62, we're going to be describing what is called the human condition. And I go ahead and I wrote at the very top of page 61 and put parenthetically 60 to 62, the human condition. I'm going to talk just a second about that. Human condition impacts and affects, and all of us, irrespective of whether we're alcoholic or not. We all suffer, and we all are a part of this human condition. So when they talk about this particular actor that kind of wants to run the show themselves, that could apply to anybody. Anybody that's a human could be described right there. So yes, when we're alcoholic, as I like to put it, when it comes to these type of ailments or detractors, if you will, we kind of have it so that the volume is just turned up to loud instead of a nice even level of noise. But so first and foremost, I want to make sure that there is a distinction here, that this isn't just talking about alcoholics when we're talking about these type of scenarios. These type of examples, they are in fact part of the human condition, and we're going to talk about the human condition between now and page 62. And we also are looking at this idea that we are convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So that self-will run riot, all right? We can't fix self with self, okay? That means that we need something bigger than ourselves in order to give us the kind of strength that we're looking for, which is that deep personal inner strength, which comes with that spiritual experience that you're going to have with a higher power. All right. So big message here. Stop trying to run your life on your own terms. Stop trying to fix self with self, because it's impossible. and I mean that sincerely. And you're going to be much more successful when you let yourself go and you allow this higher power to enter your life and help you move forward. Couple of things. This is the start of the solution here. This kind of wrote out to my left here with this first requirement. As I circled first, and by making sure that I understood it, I also underlined self-will, and I underlined self-propulsion, and I highlighted actor who wants to run the whole show, because I want to remind myself, remember, we can't remember, but I want to remind myself that the fact is I have tried for years and years and years, for as long as I can remember, to run the whole show myself. And in my case, it was even more so because as a Marine officer, I had the requirement to basically be ready to run the whole show. So it just fed my my human condition. And again, that volume was just turned up really loud. And sure, sometimes I probably was kind, considerate, patient, and generous, you know, and modest, and even self-sacrificing. But I can tell you, probably more times than not that I can remember them all, but I was mean, I was egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. And that's important to admit. It's important to identify with, and it's important to the Smith and Wesson. That's it. So it's just important to make sure that you realize just how selfish you are in trying to do things on your own and fix yourself with self. And everybody around you is affected in a negative way. Rob?
I have to quit playing God. Now, the next paragraph I'm going to read, I'm going to change he to I. Perfect. And you'll notice how, you know, we're talking about me. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. I begin to think life doesn't treat me very well. I decide to exert myself more. I become, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit me. Admitting I may be somewhat at fault, I am sure the other people are more to blame. I become angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is my basic trouble? Am I not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Am I not a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I manage it well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that there are the things I want? And do not my actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Am I not, even in my best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony?
Yep. Excellent, Rob. And I always appreciate it when you read that paragraph in the way that you do. It is absolutely applicable here. And essentially that they have written it so that it applies to everyone, and it kind of uses that third person, if you will, but it personalizes it so much more when you put I instead of he as you go through this particular paragraph. And I think that drives that point home. If you can read this in the manner in which Rob just read it, I think that you start to identify with what they are trying to say here. Now, remember, we are still working on step 3 here, okay? So just want to make sure that everybody's aware of the fact that we're still working on step 3. We haven't finished step 3 yet. We're just getting into the preparation and the work that's on it. A couple of notes that I put in here is that I put out to the right at the very beginning of this paragraph is self-pity. And it's something that I think that is another way of just kind of putting it. And it just reminds me that I kind of, you know, I exercised a bit of self-pity as I went through this. And then I answered as well, the I or me, and I put in here a couple of times, yep, yes. And I just identified with it. So really what I'm trying to say is kind of get used to kind of getting into these paragraphs, putting yourself into that paragraph, answering some of the questions that they're asking here as it goes along, and really start to embrace and digest what is being said here. All right, it's important. Okay, the baggage the biggest stumbling block in sobriety is this part here, the victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I manage it better. Okay. So that is the biggest stumbling block in sobriety, I believe. And I made a note of that out to the right. At the very end here, it is a producer of confusion rather than harmony. This is what we do and what we are. We are producers of confusion rather than harmony as alcoholics and suffering from, as I'm talking about, this human condition with the volume turned up. Thanks, Rob, for reading it in the way that you did. That was excellent.
Thank you, Leo. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our prostitution, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity?
Absolutely. We are concerned about ourselves more so than anybody else. We are wrapped up and mired in our own resentments and this self-pity that we have for ourselves. Okay. We're only concerned with ourselves. I wrote that at the very top of page 62. And I underlined and highlighted this self-centered and egocentric. I identify with that so much for so long, and still I suffer from it. And that's part of my not being perfect here and never will be. But it is something I work on and try not to be so self-centered and egotistical or egocentric. You could interchange any number of different scenarios as they've described here, as like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different things that we could pinpoint and identify with. It's just, here's some great examples of that. So highlighting concerned with ourselves, our resentments and self-pity. Like I said, it is just the focus that we have as alcoholics and with the volume turned up. Rob?
Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt.
Absolutely. There again. Okay, so a bunch of self here, all right, driven by 100 forms of fear, which is a big one, and we'll see that in step 4, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, all wrapped up into selfishness and being self-centered. All right. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Well, of course they're going to retaliate. And guess what? After the fact of doing this on a number of occasions, especially during a drunken stupor or some form of debacle, at times they're going to go ahead and go on the offensive to begin with, which is their own form of defense. Again, this is part of that human condition. We're all going to do this. We're going to put that wall up and try to protect ourselves. And they're going to lash out at us from the very beginning. I remember, and I do this and I have to remember it, but there were times when I'd take that first drink. In fact, it would actually start the tension in the room as soon as I picked up a bottle of alcohol in order to either drink from and or pour myself a drink. And immediately there would be some level of what I would look at as somebody saying something to me that I thought was a provocation, and that it was hurtful because I was absolutely convinced that I was going to be able to drink like other people. I was going to be able to control it and it was going to be fine, but you're not even giving me a chance. You're already on the defensive, and how dare you not give me that chance? And it would hurt me. And guess what? It wasn't their fault. It was my fault. It's because I put them through hell before, and they just didn't want to experience that again. I was essentially destroying the evening, the day, whatever it might be, the event, the coming together of people, as we've talked about, and that kind of free spirited kind of relaxation bunk. I was creating everything but that. And I basically had set myself up to be hurt because I had already hurt them first. Can't say it any better than the way that they've said it here and what I've described. And that's kind of where we are. Think about this, really sit down and kind of put yourself in this position and really start to identify with it. Okay. Again, this is all part of the human condition. Everybody suffers from this. Everybody experiences this, regardless of whether they're alcoholics or not. Us alcoholics, though, we just have that volume turned up to where it's really loud. And I just want to make sure that you sit down and kind of talk to yourself, read these chapters, or not these chapters, these paragraphs, and essentially put yourself in that mode and really start to identify with that. Because here's another thing that's working. You're prepping yourself to focus on yourself, okay, and your resentments, not other people's, but your resentments. And that helps get you ready, because as you finish step 3, you're going to move into step 4. And that's critical for you to be at this point where you understand the human condition, you understand your role and your responsibilities that you've had in that. You also understand the things that you've done wrong and how you focused yourself in your self-centeredness, as well as being self-pitying. Rob?
We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. What did I do to set the ball in motion? When we come to our step 4, what did I do that they want to retaliate? Remember, our selfishness and self-centeredness is I do everything for myself, for my own benefit. I'm not benefiting anybody else other than myself. I might do something nice for you, but it's only to benefit myself in the long run. Okay, I might help you move, but the reason I help you move is because you owe me big time. Okay, I have to get rid of that. I have to think of, what does my higher power want? My higher power wants me to do what is right. Not just what is right for me, but what is right. So our troubles we think are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help.
We sure did. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. It's my life and it's my fault. All right.
Bingo.
Just remember that the focus is on me. And this, again, is part of the human condition. And it is basically that extreme example of self-will run riot. I've underlined that. Again, that's my example, is you just turn the volume up. You must be rid of this selfishness, and we must, or it kills us. And that's important to note. This is very serious what we're talking about. We're having some fun with it. And certainly at the beginning of meetings or at the end of meetings, we also have some fun just talking with each other. But never forget that this is a very serious thing. And it's something that we either get or we don't. And if we don't, it's liable to kill us. All right, let's go ahead and keep going here.
You got it. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom.
Right. And just so you know, here, this is the how and why of it, and we're going to answer that. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. It doesn't work. It won't work. Okay. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, this human condition, God was going to be our director. And they just basically give you some good examples of what we mean by that. He is the principal. We are his agents. And we talk about the keystone. Rob and a couple of us are members of the Keystone Group. This is the passage as which we named ourselves because the Keystone is the very top of an arch. It's that one stone that comes into the middle at the very top, and it creates the strength by which that arch is going to be able to hold up a ceiling, a door, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where we come from. And the thing I have in this particular paragraph is stop doing what doesn't work. Just stop doing what doesn't work. Must. When I read must, is used 76 times in the first portion of this book. All right. Make sure that you understand that we mean that you must do these things in order to find recovery and a better experience with the human condition. Rob?
Leo, I have nothing to add to that. It is 12:51. Did you want to continue on, or did you want to bring Bill into this?
Let's go ahead. I was going to try to get down to
Third
right
step
at
prayer?
the beginning of step 4. So we'll
Okay. You got it. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn.
Okay, and what's important about this paragraph is what we call the 9 promises. I'm going to go through that with you right now and just kind of identify with them. We had a new employer being all powerful. So 1, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. That's number 1. Number 2, established on such a footing, I underlined footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. And I underlined interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. 3, more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. And 4, as we felt new power flow in. 5, as we enjoyed peace of mind, underlining peace of mind. 6, as we discovered we could face life successfully, underlining successfully. 7, as we became conscious of his presence, and I've underlined conscious and presence. 8, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter, underlining lose, fear, and tomorrow or the hereafter. And 9, we were reborn. Okay, now we're about to do the 3rd step prayer. And we always do that at the beginning of this meeting, but now for once, I want you to kind of just sit back and listen as Rob reads it and think and see if it comes across a little bit differently at this point, having gone through what we just went through. Rob?
We are now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him.
Okay. At this point, you would have been at step 3 and you would have completed step 3. Okay, you see how much prep work we did in order to get through step 3? We just completed step 3 by doing this particular this prayer. And oh, by the way, if you wanted to alter the prayer slightly into making it your own, you're free to do that. Okay, it's not necessarily that it has to be exactly this, but if something helps you identify with the idea that comes out of this, in the beginning, or in the big part of this is that relieve me of the bondage of self. That's a big one. And then bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. Okay. That is also an important part. Now, after finishing this, you have now done step 3. And you're going, as it talks about here, could of the last abandon ourselves utterly to him. You're moving from one place to another, and I want you to now kind of just stop and think. All right, that's where we are. It's just kind of stopping and thinking. Let's go ahead and read this last part here, Rob.
You got it. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. Their wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though, if honestly and humbly made. In effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once.
Absolutely. And this is a relationship that you're creating with your higher power. I want to make sure that emphasizing is step 3 is an idea. All right. And it's one that you want to embrace. I wrote out to the side a few names of people that were impactful that I actually took this step with. And I think it's important. First of all, you need to do this with your higher power. And that's first and foremost. When they talk about your wife, best friend, spiritual advisor, back then they didn't have sponsors as of yet. And I want to just indicate that a sponsor is also somebody that you might want to have this experience with. And I'm just going to share this with you just as a forthright of where I was. Mara, my wife, Kim, my first sponsor, David, who is a close friend of mine and also a recovered alcoholic, the fellowship that I've shared with, and then also Rob and Jonathan are 2 people in my life that I actually took this 3rd step with, and kind of had that created a stronger relationship, not only with my higher power, but also with them. All right, we're going to stop there. We do have about 3 minutes. I am going to ask Bill to say just a couple of words here as he kind of thinks, and we'll go from there.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Did a good job here in explaining all of this. Real quick, but basically how it works is probably the most read thing in AA and probably the least paid attention to. And what Bill's doing, he's preparing us here to go into step 3. And what this first page and a half of how it works is designed to tell us, what Bill's doing, he's giving us 3 requirements to get through this process and get sober. First thing he's telling us is honesty. And like you mentioned already, honesty was mentioned 3 times in the first paragraph. So we need honesty to get through this. We need the willingness to go to any length, and we need to abandon ourselves to God. And abandon means surrender. That means we have to surrender to God. So those 3 things, according to Bill, are necessary to get through this process. Then he lists all of the steps, and I'm not going to go through them. It would take me too long. And then he's giving us this preparation for getting into step 3. And basically, when we get to step 3, the way we do it is by saying this prayer. And like Leo already mentioned, you don't have to use these exact words. You can use any words you want as long as you have the same idea there. And basically in here, what he's telling us when he said, relieve me of the bondage of self. Notice it doesn't say the bondage of alcohol. It says the bondage of self, because I'm my problem. I'm what's blocking me off. That's what I'm trying to get rid of, my own bondage that I'm creating. And then it says, a victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Right here in the middle of the step 3 prayer, he's talking about helping other people. This book is constantly talking about helping other people. That's what our goal is going to be. That's what this program is trying to get us to. It's trying to get us out of being selfish and being considerate and helpful to other people. And he's telling us that right here in the middle of this prayer. So again, you can use this prayer or you can make up your own prayer, however you want to do it. And it's a good idea to do this with a sponsor, or you can do it all by yourself alone, whatever you're more comfortable with. There's no rules or regulations on this. As long as you do it and you get through it. And remember, the operative word in step 3 is made a decision. The operative word is not turning my will and my life over to the care of God. It's making a decision to do that. And the way I turn it over to the care of God is by the rest of the steps, 4 through 12. All right. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Bill.
Bill. I appreciate your succinctness, but also it was insightful. I appreciate that very much. All right, let's go ahead and close things out with the Serenity Prayer, Rob, and then we'll just open it up for a
Okay.
little bit of.
I just want to put a plug in, Leo,
Yeah.
for Bill's meeting on Fridays at 11 a.m. Every Friday at 11 a.m. The Zoom information is in the chat. Also, Leo has got his YouTube all set up. Leo, can you throw that in the chat if you get
I
a
sure
chance,
will,
please?
absolutely, while
And then I'll
we're,
take a copy of it. So the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
all right, and stop the recording.